Why is zero trust architecture complicated as compared to an identity-based method of security?
What model would you draw or what picture would you draw for zero trust? I really see it as a triangle. And
Mhm.
the points of the triangle are the device, the identity, and the network. And zero trust is really rethinking the security boundaries between those three, right? So
Mhm.
there used to be inferred security relationships between those three things. Zero trust is all about rethinking, shaking those up. And so identity has always been part of zero trust. And doing identity well is a critical part of doing zero trust critically well.
I would agree with Paul. And then the only other thing I would add is in that triangle, I would actually make it a square and I'd throw in a fourth one and I would bring in workload. You know why? Because at the end of the day, what is it that we're really trying to protect? Not my identity, not your identity, not the endpoint, but it's ultimately that workload, which includes data.
I always look at the classic way when you explain zero trust to people is think about when someone says spicy food. It means different things to different folks that are there. And that's a perfect example. What's hot to somebody is not. And the same thing for zero trust. It's literally an architecture. And you really should think of it not necessarily as an architecture, but as an ecosystem. There are multiple components that need to seamlessly interoperate together to provide the user the function that's there. I believe you can actually get things to the quote, quote, nirvana of like passwordless kind of authentication into some of those areas using a zero trust model. But it's a lot of work. You really have to have a plan because if you don't, you're just grasping at things. You might have different solutions for people outside the organization, inside the organization, should all be the same. If you make it more complicated, people are going to revolt.
This comes from Jonathan Waldrop. When developing and adopting a zero trust strategy, when should you take a best of platform approach versus a best of breed slash point solution?
It has to be a concert of systems. And in that case, best of breed goes out of the window because really, if you have systems that are working well with each other, that's far more important than plugging, bolting on multiple best of breed tools that only create complexity. And in most of the cases, we know complexity is the enemy of security.
This comes from David Christensen. How is zero trust helping with the data problem?
ZTNA, in my opinion, by the way you look at the architectures out there, is primarily about securing the user access with all the identity and authentication, authorization, and applying access controls, device, all that stuff out to the application edge. What ZTNA doesn't expand into is what's going on between all the communications happening between these micro components and access to data. That component is not covered in ZTNA. So while microsegmentation is a foundational thing there, microsegmentation is not enough because attackers are using known ports and protocols, right? They allow traffic to move laterally and cause damage. So you have to inspect every hop of that east-west traffic as well.
I think it helps with the data problem because the problem with data is like data stored somewhere. So there's a problem in itself, but the access to the data. If I strip down that access and said, it really is a need to know components of that, then I actually can build it. So the only people that can get access to this data are the people that actually need the data.
How many of us here have had to, over a weekend, just enable secure remote access for all of our employees, right? And I've seen so many companies be able to do that, right, in a matter of hours, with our own company, 30,000 plus employees over a weekend, secure access for everyone remotely. I mean, and I've seen that with many other companies being able to successfully roll out, right? So that's been super impressive.
If you follow zero trust architecture and everything else, the systems can defend themselves. The systems are protected. You can only get access to things that are there. Only things that can talk to it are actually there. It sounds scary as hell of like, hey, we're going to drop the firewalls on here. But when it works, you can see a lot more. You can see a lot of other kind of things that are going on. It's a different mindset. But it's a scary mindset, but it actually works out pretty well.
Let's not forget the fact that we are ultimately trying to protect. Of course, yes, there's data on the endpoints, but the crown jewels in our private data centers, wherever our data is sitting across the multi-cloud infrastructure, a private, public, all those workloads, we got to secure those as well as all the east-west traffic, because ultimately it's never just that initial breach of a server that causes the damage, it's the lateral movement.
Use the OSI model to go, here's all the layers that zero trust has to play in. Virtual environments are great for easy wins because a lot of times these big virtual environments, they're segmented, but everybody can talk to everybody in the cluster that's there. And you're like, bad idea. Start with easy wins because that's going to get you experience. That's going to get you practice. You know what works, what doesn't work. Be sure to think of ecosystem. If you don't have all of those things built out, you're going to go into spot and run into a dead end or a cul-de-sac, and you're going to have to come back out. Make sure things are working together and make sure that you plan on that working together instead of making isolations.